The gap. The gap between a trigger and a reaction. That's where we usually get lost. We get triggered and then we react in ways that are often not very helpful or beneficial to the situation at hand. We all know that place. And the trick isn't to keep doing the work until we're completely triggerless. And that is something that is sort of happening in parallel to the unfolding of this process. So it will happen, and the triggers do become less, and you do become you do feel freer in your ability to respond rather than react. However, if you think that you will nail each and every trigger, find it, uproot it, get rid of it, heal it until all of them are gone, well, you're kind of setting yourself up for a very long and difficult path until you reach the so-called destination. And that's where the direct path really shines because you don't have to wait to do any of that. You can already access your being. In IFS, we talk about capital S self, which already knows, already is the peace that is being longed for, is already still, is already at rest. And something that I found extremely helpful just recently coming across the 5 aggregates that make up the illusion of the self, which is something that is taught in the Buddhist tradition. They point to how those different aggregates, the different things, make up our sense of identity, which is the thing, the mechanism, the selfing mechanism, the ego identity that keeps us stuck in suffering, in the wheels of samsara. And so if we notice that there is a emotion which triggers a thought, which triggers a judgment, which triggers a volition or like a sense of a volition and a directioned action to usually step away or move toward the object of our aversion of desire, that's when we can begin to really slow down and notice the gap that we're actually neither of those things. So the 5 aggregates contain the body and whatever bodily sensations we're identified with. Also the emotional tone of our body, so whatever emotions arise and aversions and clinging and anger, rage, sadness, whatever. And then you have the thought forms, which arise sort of in parallel. It's all really happening simultaneously, but you can slow it down just enough to notice the mechanism. That as you feel something in your body, there is a thought that labels it, that's perception, that labels that as undesirable. And from that place of recognizing the arising as something that we want to move away from, there's that moment of volition and choosing to act in accordance with this perception. And the fifth one is consciousness. So even as we find the observer or the witness or unity consciousness, that is still yet another thing that we identify with or identify as. We've just went from identifying ourselves as this body or this mind, as the thinker, and now we're the witness, or now we're God consciousness. But that is still not it. There's still an identity, and that identity needs to ultimately collapse in order for us to really feel free and boundless and not constrained by any identity, really. And there is I've been observing this in myself as I've been experimenting with this edge, that as I catch the gap in between this movement between like a trigger, I suppose, or a stimulus to reaction, to thought, to action, and then perception abiding in some sort of a consciousness, if I slow it down enough and find a gap in there where I can break that identification, then suddenly something really vast opens up and it feels like I am just dissolving into everything or nothing, which is one and the same anyway. And from there, there's such a more expansive, spacious, loving, still, peaceful feeling of not identifying with any one emotion aversion, or desire. At that point, we're free because we're not pushing and we're not pulling. And our field of experience seems to expand as we're no longer constrained by these energetic contractions in our subtle body. And we are free to know ourselves as the vastness, as the boundless ocean of loving awareness. So, what I've been playing with is to notice when I'm triggered, and I would advise playing with a trigger that is to the softer side, since if we're really caught by a strong, intense emotional trigger that immediately takes us, that might be, well, it just might not be the easiest way to start investigating this. So find something subtle. It might just be a slight somatic discomfort. It might be a slight moving away from the current moment. There might be a pull towards the next moment of doing something, achieving, coming back home from the lovely walk and finishing that project or making that phone call or cleaning up, whatever. That seems to be helping us move away from some sort of a sensation that's here now that then takes on the thought form of, oh, the house is such a mess, or oh, I'm so behind of work on work. And that creates this momentum away from the current moment and away from the peace that is here now. But we need to relax into it. So notice when that pull happens, notice that there's a bodily sensation that is then connected to a thought form that is connected to a perception of it, and then a volitional action, and also the place of consciousness from where we're observing all of that, and just drop it all together. And notice the small window that opens up where we can begin to know ourselves as something beyond all of those things. And to use IFS terminology, we really become aware in that moment, really contrasting the parts which might arise as clouds against this completely spotless, beautiful blue sky, which is the self. And so notice this small pull in any direction. It might even be a seemingly enjoyable thought. I can't wait to come home and, have dinner. But nevertheless, it is a part that is a longing for some sort of fulfillment in the future. It is ever so slightly pulling us away from the now. And as we become better at identifying those moments and becoming aware of them and slowing down just enough to find the gap in between this mechanism, we can begin to practice to abide in that gap in between, in that spotless blue sky that is our nature. I'll leave it at that, and please let me know in the comments if you can find what I'm talking about and what your experience has been with this. I'm super curious to hear your comments. So please also subscribe to the channel if you found this talk interesting, because I would love to create a community around our shared interest in our true nature. Thank you, and see you in the next one.